I was born in Hamburg, and you know, when I was 3.5, my sister came along, so we were a family of four, you know, and I went to school like every other child. Weekends we spent in our, you know, on the sea, in our flat on the sea. And I was a busy girl, you know, doing a lot of activities, you know, handicrafts and playing a musical instrument and going to, you know, gymnastics and stuff like that. I was very bubbly and very active, and yeah, and I had a very happy childhood. Actually, I had an imaginary friend before my sister was born. You know, when I was very little, I had this imaginary friend who was always with me that only I could see. And well, when we grew up, we went to church, you know, we were taught about God, and we prayed at night, a little prayer. And then, you know, we went to religious school education once a week as we got our confirmation and you know, so on, like young Christians do. But God didn't really, I mean, religion didn't feature very much in our lives. You know, we didn't always pray before eating, or my parents, you know, didn't go to church that regularly. It was just a certain time when we went to this religious education, and then it kind of disappeared again, you know. And so when I was a teenager, I didn't go to church anymore. It was uncool, and the church didn't really speak to me as I was growing up. I must say I really liked the religious education. I liked the stories about Jesus and, you know, and in the Bible and so on. But as I grew into being a teenager, the church didn't speak to me anymore, unfortunately. You know, they tried to have ballet performances and rock concerts in the church, but that doesn't really turn you to God, you know. And when I was a young adult, I just quit. I left the church. In a sense, I mean, I stopped paying, you know, the tax that you have to pay. And but I always had an interest for spirituality, you know, for the other world. I think I was born with this because, in fact, I later found out that my grandparents from my father's side were very religious, you know, and in fact there was a convert from Protestantism to Catholicism in the family. And, you know, one of my cousins, great cousins, had become a priest. So there is a very strong religious vein in my family, but I had never really been exposed to it because my grandparents, you know, were already, you know, my grandmother has passed away and so on. And I was too little when they were still around to understand this. I only found out later. In fact, they were members of the Pentecostal Christian Church, which is a very experiential church, a very mystical church where they speak in tongues, you know, they receive the Holy Ghost, and they experience the spiritual dimension of Christianity. As a young person, I had an interest for for spirituality. When I went to I became an exchange student in America. I went to the United States when I was 16 and 17 for a year, the junior high school, and I lived in Portland, Oregon. They put me there, and I went to see the Bhagwan Ranch, you know, in Oregon, the famous Bhagwan Ranch in Oregon. Everybody dressed in red and orange, and twice a day when Bhagwan drove past, nowadays he's called Osho, I think they call him Osho, everybody bowed down in front of him, you know, and he was passing by in this Rolls Royce. And I found it odd, even at that time, you know, how all those disciples could give their money to the spiritual leader who then has a massive collection of Rolls Royces and Rolex watches, and how everybody bowed down in front of him, you know. Anyway, it was interesting, and some of the teachings I found in a book were interesting, but, you know, this mixture of commerce and spirituality didn't really gel for me. So anyway, you know, went back to London and, back to Germany and continued my studies. And then, but I already spoke English very well, and I wanted to use my language skills, you know. So I kind of thought, where else could I go? You know, Hamburg was becoming too small again for me, and I wanted to escape because I had already been on my own. I had been an independent person, and, you know, then reverting back to being a child, being a daughter, was a little bit difficult for me. So I wanted to, you know, break out again, and I mean, you know, and also use my language skills. So really London became this dream destination in my own head, you know, where I wanted to live, because you use your English, but it's only 1 hour away from home. And so I tried to, after my school, I went into journalism. I did a traineeship at Radio Hamburg, a private radio station in Hamburg. And the boss, and, you know, my first celebrity interview was with Keith Haring, this great graffiti artist. And my boss at the time organized an interview with Capital Radio here in London. And I went, you know, to London for the big Nelson Mandela concert. There was a massive concert with all sorts of pop stars, from Simple Minds to Bryan Adams, you know, all in order to free Nelson Mandela. And a very close friend of mine had his 40th birthday, so I needed to get back a day earlier than this radio interview was. So I turned up a day early at Capital Radio for my interview, and the boss wasn't too impressed. He said, sorry, you know, well, our appointment is tomorrow. I said, well, tomorrow I'm flying back already. So I guess it wasn't meant to be with Capital Radio. But then shortly afterwards, there was an ad in a local Time Out in Hamburg saying MTV was looking for fresh wind. They were looking for a German presenter. MTV is a music television, you know, a music station that aired music videos. It didn't exist in Europe at that time, but it was already on the air in America when I was living in America, but I never watched it, only once or twice. However, this job advert said, if you get the job, you have to move to London. So this was my reason to apply. And, you know, and anyway, I cut a long story short, after half a year, I got the job. After half a year and a few auditions, I got the job with MTV and moved to London in 1989 to become the first German MTV presenter. This is one of my 2 golden Ottos, which is the prize I got for my youth show that I did in Germany. The one that sacked me the moment I became a Muslim. And this is the Golden Camera. It's the equivalent of a BAFTA award. And I received that, I think, in 93, it says on there somewhere. Also, you know, for my work on TV, I guess, MTV and the youth show. So in 1989, my life changed. You know, suddenly from this little journalist in Hamburg, I became an international European celebrity. You know, I was in everybody's home on TV every day all around Europe. And we broadcast even in India and in the Middle East and in the Maghreb region, you know. So, and I stayed for 7.5 years hosting all different shows on the channel, you know. And also I traveled once a month all around Europe to report from wherever something was happening, you know. I ran in the Olympics in 1992 in Barcelona. I still have my torch somewhere here. This is from the Olympics in Barcelona, 1992. Ran in the amateur run, you know, like they had here the torch relay, you know. Anyway, so you know, I went to the opening of Euro Disney, interviewed Bob Geldof there. We went to some mega football match in Istanbul, you know, wherever I went to the opening of the Rolling Stones show in Boston. So even, you know, further afield we went. And it was very special, you know, interviewing all sorts of major stars, you know, all the big players in music, and meeting them and going out with them and hanging out. You know, I went out at night here in London and told Europe what was happening on the scene the next day. You know, it was a very special time. And you know, and you can say I was the hot chick in town. I had 3 invitations every night. You know, I had to decide, should I go with this film director or with this pop star, or, you know, my God, how times have changed. And anyway, so then at the height of my career, you see, it was fantastic. It was exciting. It was new. I learned to present on TV every day. Also under tremendous pressure. We hosted massive live shows as well, live music shows, once in front of 70,000 people in Germany. I hosted something. I went on stage before Prince came on, 70,000 people waiting for me, clapping and all of that. So, it was a great experience. I learned professionally, I really learned a lot, and even to interview very famous people. Normally people get starstruck or get very nervous. And, if you do it every day, you get used to it, to handle important people. So on the one hand, it was a great challenge professionally. On the other hand, it was also very repetitive. The same videos aired for 3 months. So we had to keep thinking of new ways of introducing the same old videos. And also, it was just music. It was just pop music. I mean, before at the radio station, I dealt with all different kinds of subjects, politics, environment, art, design, whatever it was, community issues. Here, it was mainly pop music. And in order to keep my brain active, I signed up for all sorts of courses outside, international relations, European history, film studies, whatever it was, arts. And so basically I was mentally not really challenged enough. And really, you see, it was also a very hedonistic lifestyle and a very external, the image counted. I had to look perfect all the time and perform and be perfect at all times. And, when the show, on show, basically during my shows, and the show had to go on, never mind what was happening in your private life. So there was a lot of pressure. And, as a presenter, you have to always be you're the smiling front. You have to have this, this perfect image when things go wrong backstage and, there's arguments or the bands don't turn up. You have to present and pretend everything is fine. So there was a lot of pressure, and also, rushing from one show to the next, year in, year out. Eventually I felt, well, why am I doing all of this? There was an emptiness inside. I can't really explain it. There I am on stage in front of 70,000 people, and then I go back to my own hotel room and it's silent and my ears are still ringing from the noise. How do you come down from this, rush? And, and there was an emptiness inside that I didn't know how to fill. I thought it was human love that I was missing. I was missing a boyfriend. I was single, But in retrospect, I realized that no human being could have really filled that void. It was, in fact, God that I was missing. It was an inner peace, and a way to come to inner peace, and which is really attaching yourself to the divine. And that spiritual dimension was completely missing in my life, And so obviously I was unsatisfied. I was unhappy, despite having this high life, despite having this dream job. I wasn't really fully satisfied. And it was at a moment of crisis, really, that I met a Muslim who was just in the process of finding his faith. And it was not any Muslim. It was, in fact, Imran Khan, a famous cricket star. He had just won the World Cup for Pakistan. It was in '92. I had no idea because I didn't know anything about cricket. In Germany, we don't have cricket. And anyway, and he was telling me how he wants to give up his high-flying cricketing career in order to build a hospital in Lahore. Now, that's a bit of a strange career decision. But he explained the essence of being a Muslim is to believe in God and to do good deeds and to serve God, Anyway, I soon learned, an introduction to Islam. He talked to me about, the values, what it means to be a Muslim and his motivation. And then, and he asked me out to join him with friends at some point. And I turned up in a mini dress. And he asked me if I would mind to keep on my coat for the rest of the evening. So, in the entertainment business, it was all about, if you've got it, flaunt it, Whereas now I was learning the concept of modesty. He explained women and men don't show flesh in his culture. In fact, they dress modestly. And, when I started thinking about it more deeply, I actually agreed that perhaps it is degrading that women, advertise any kind of product from car tires to cigarettes and alcohol on posters half naked, with their bodies basically. And even now I wonder, why do women have to turn up in business meetings, showing like everything, whereas men are always wearing their suits? I mean, it is degrading. And so I fairly quickly got that point, and in fact changed my style of dress while I was working on MTV, and I started wearing longer skirts and higher tops. And in fact, at the time, the fashion was grunge, so no one really noticed. But, as the fashion changed, my clothes stayed longer, and I felt much more dignified and more comfortable that way. Who needs to be whistled at for their long legs? I mean, even now when you go out in the winter, in the freezing winter, women are wearing belts as skirts and then high heels like this. I don't know how you can walk on this. And I mean, aren't people freezing? And then they freeze to death, as we had a few women now freezing to death after they, came home from a nightclub and couldn't find their key or something like that. Anyway, it's all very bizarre, and I do feel happy to nowadays to be more covered. I learned the concept of modesty through Imran and everything else really about Islam, slowly but surely. I mean, he played Sufi music to me. Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's a very big Pakistani singer, singing about love for the beloved, which turns into love for the ultimate beloved, love for God. And those lyrics really touched me in a way no pop song has done on MTV. For example, there's in my book, my book which tells my story in depth, by the way. I put one of those little poems, written by a great Sufi from the Sufi master from the subcontinent, which is the sort of stuff that opened my heart at the time when I was presenting on MTV. He wrote, his name is Bulleh Shah, and he wrote, "You have learned so much and read 1,000 books. Have you ever read yourself? You have gone to the mosque and the temple. Have you ever visited your soul? You're busy fighting Satan. Have you ever fought your ill intentions? You have reached into the skies, but you have failed to reach what's in your heart." So, so let's basically look into our hearts and our souls, and that is really where the seat of God, and where we can find our peace and our divine spark, and where it's at, really. So anyway, the journey continued. I listened to more music. I started reading books on Islam. In fact, the very first book Imran gave me was called Man and Islam by Ali Shariati. And it really spoke to me, He talked about how the soul is entrapped in the cage of the body, and how it longs to attach itself to the divine, and how you can do this through love and faith. And, and he criticized our civil society here in the West, where civilizational diseases are on the increase, like depression, all sorts of mental problems, health problems, and we don't know what to do about it. Families are breaking down, and how civil is that when we don't even look after the old, after our elderly people, and stick them in homes? So, I mean, he had a lot of good points in this book. And I continued reading, Gay Eaton, The Destiny of Man and Islam and the Destiny of Man, and Martin Ling's The Beautiful Biography on the Prophet, peace be upon him. And Muhammad Asad, Road to Mecca. He was a Jew, Leopold Weiss, and became a journalist. I mean, he was a journalist, in fact, in the 1930s, and became a Muslim and one of the scholars of Islam. And he translated the Quran into English, a very popular translation. And so I read it. I continued reading books on Islam ever since, and and I was just it was mind blowing what I found. I found a whole new universe, and I found a lot of commonalities. And I learned that really Islam is a continuation of Christianity. It's not something separate or something altogether foreign or alien. It's actually a continuation of Christianity, and and all the concepts I was reading about God is one. He we worship Him and Him alone and directly, and and He's the source and destiny of everything in this universe and all the other universes. And, we are responsible for our own deeds. We're not born as sinners and someone else has taken away all our sins already. I mean, it is logical. The message just makes sense. And, as I was reading with an open heart and an open mind, I realized, this is the truth. I couldn't escape it, And, however, I had questions about women issues, are women not treated as second-class citizens? Are women not suppressed in Islam? And then Imran asked me to travel with him to Pakistan to visit him. And, with a few friends, we went on some hiking trips. And I paid particular attention to how women were treated and how I was treated as a Westerner. And I must say, everybody I met treated me with great respect, and addressed me as a sister and didn't flirt with me in an inappropriate manner, which happens so much here. But, I felt I was really well respected. And I mean, what particularly touched me was the warmth and the generosity and the kindness of the Muslims I met, and we traveled high up the mountains and, to a place beyond Hunza, where the famous apricot comes from, where people live on top of their animals. They're so poor. So the natural heat of the body of the animals, keeps them warm. And they have no satellite dishes, no running water or anything. And yet, they were dignified. They were generous even. They offered us whatever they had. Almonds, nuts, apricots that they were drying with a bismillah in the name of God. And I was, I liked the fact how much God featured in people's lives, how God was really at the center of people's lives, and how people could be so generous despite their dire poverty, and it really made me reflect and made me think and reevaluate my life in the West, which was so different, and we got annoyed for very inane reasons, and and here people were really struggling with the essentials and seemed to bear it with dignity. So, and I had a lot of incidents as I was shuttling between the worlds, which I write about in my book, how I was touched and by the way Muslims dealt, with issues in life, with challenges, with, how it can work in a very different way to what we're used to, So, I continued reading for 3 years and meeting Muslims, asking questions and so on. And, I'm writing, there were, of course, some challenges in the Quran, the verse, was it in Surah 3, verse 34, the famous beating verse. And it took me 19 years to get to the bottom of that. I had to leave it aside because I couldn't get satisfactory answers for a very long time. But overall, the spirit of the Quran and, the message overall is sublime and is, and we're not meant to nitpick and find, criticize little points if we can't understand, with our mere human comprehension or beginner's way of seeing things, then it's best to leave certain things behind and come back to them later. So that's what I did. And after 3 years of studying and reading and meeting people, Eventually, Imran, we weren't friends anymore, basically. I was ready. I wanted to embrace Islam. I wanted to bring God into my life. In fact, I wanted to practice. I wanted to pray. I realized that, all the reading in the world won't really get me there, won't allow me to feel what it means being a Muslim, So I realized the only way to actually taste the spiritual fruits I was reading about was to get down on my prayer mat and practice and, become a Muslim, basically. So that was in April 1995. And I converted in a North London mosque, and became a Muslim. It's been challenging ever since. I never came back on German television, since being a Muslim, except for 5 minutes a week, once upon a time, for, 10 years later or something like that. And that is just strange. But there you are. It's and that really is also the reason, why I wrote my book, because I realized there's so much negativity towards Islam. It has such a bad image, and people don't really know. Even in Britain, 1 in 4 British people don't think Islam is compatible with British life, and that is really, it's very sad. I mean, nowadays information is publicly available, and people still, have that opinion, even here in Britain. And Britain is the best place for Muslims in Europe. And this is the reason why I live here, why I never went back to Germany, because of what happened to me. But it's also the reason why I wrote my book, From MTV to Mecca, because I'm trying to dispel some prejudices, and show, if I, as an former MTV presenter, living at the forefront of popular culture, can find my happiness and peace in Islam, there must be something to it, So I take the reader by the hand as I'm overcoming my prejudices and, my experiences, which I shared. Some of them I shared with you now. I'm telling in more detail and trying to show, as I learn about Islam while I was working on MTV, I'm sharing, these teachings slowly with the reader and taking them, in. So really, it's an introduction to Islam. It's a book for dawah, and it's also a great support for other new Muslims, who are faced with the same problems. Like, how did my family react? My family wasn't happy I became Muslim, They were wondering, well, if you don't get married to this guy, why do you have to take up his religion? They didn't understand. And because they just read Islam in the media, and that's what happens usually to families of reverts, They don't know anything about Islam than what you read in the media, and it's negative. So it's very difficult, how do you educate them? So even the book was a great education for my parents. And now they see it gives me happiness. They see it gives me inner contentment. And, and also, in fact, it has made me a more conscientious family member. My parents now are more important. My family is more important than my friends. Before, it was always my friends were more important. So they benefit in a way, And what else has Islam given me? Well, it has given me inner satisfaction, inner strength, hope, and just a whole different way of seeing the world. Now I do everything in relation to God. I ask myself, is this good? Is this pleasing to God before I do it? Before I didn't have that, And so also I'm not lonely anymore. I'm always in the best of companies, and I have this internal dialogue with God all the time. This source to draw on, to connect with at all times, Like when I travel nowadays, it's wonderful. You go on your prayer mat, you find out where Mecca is, you connect with God. Before I didn't have that. So, alhamdulillah, I really feel enriched thanks to this, thanks to the faith. So, eventually I went on Umrah, alhamdulillah. And then later on, I also went on Hajj. In 2006, I had the great honor to go to Mecca. in January 2006. And, it's the journey of a lifetime. It's, you stand there before God. And I really can only recommend to anybody to do it while you're young, while you are physically fit, to really get the benefit for it. And especially to get the benefit for it for the rest of your life. I don't know why people want to go when they're really, really old. They want to sin all their life and then go on Hajj and have it all forgiven at the end of their lives. Why? Why not go before and then try hard to keep the Hajj, to live a clean life? So Alhamdulillah, it was a challenge in all ways. Physical challenge, a massive physical challenge. You don't sleep, you get sick. I mean, I felt like a zombie after a few days, or the burning throat, lack of sleep and sick and sneezing and in pain and, but because you want to be in the Haram Sharif all the time and in the holy mosques in Mecca and in Medina. And everybody else is sick, so you can't avoid the Hajj flu. But, then you're really carried by spiritual energy. And it's a challenge also in an interpersonal way. You spend time with strangers in a very enclosed space. We shared our room with 10 other women, and we only had 3 bathrooms for 50 women. It was a hardship Hajj I went on. It wasn't a 5-star luxury Hajj, and but it was a blessing. I enjoyed every moment of it. It was wonderful. In the end, we all asked for forgiveness for each other. Before, we were in Medina in these tight flats, and before we went to Mecca, one woman asked, if I could forgive her for all the wrongs, all the offenses she had done against me. And I said, well, there was nothing, don't worry. And then I asked for forgiveness. We all asked each other for forgiveness, and your hearts just melt. And we wanted to come completely clean to Mecca. And it's just so wonderful what you experience between people as well, And you're close to tears many times just from what happens. One woman in the Haram Sharif, just handed me a prayer book from, I think, Hussein it was, and she made a space for me because some man, was rude to me in the front, some hot-headed man, and told me to move away. And then this Iranian woman made space for me in the back with the women and gave me this prayer book. She said it always reaches the right person. It was meant to be for some friend of her, but she never turned up, so she gave it to me. And then I ended up reading these beautiful prayers, on the day of Arafat, and this heart-wrenchingly beautiful prayers, And, and it's so special. They say on Arafat, there's so many angels around. If you would throw a needle, you would hurt an angel, And it's that special time during, I think, Asr time, around Asr time, that everybody goes out and asks for forgiveness. And it symbolizes Judgment Day, the big day. And, I just loved it, and really the challenge is afterwards when you come back and you want to keep your Hajj and don't fall back into your old ways, or old mistakes. So I've been trying very hard ever since, and inshallah may God accept, and strangely, really, since the Hajj, my life changed again in a better way, because in fact, it came out in the German press that I went on Hajj, and it was received very positively. So positively that one article after the other followed. Ex-MTV presenter has been on Hajj, on this big pilgrimage, something really nice. And then a book agent came to me and asked me, wouldn't I like to write my story in a book? So that's how the original book came about, Von MTV nach Mecca, the German book, which was published in 2009. And so it really was only since then that I've been more, that I've been outspoken about being a Muslim and trying to tell everybody about the beautiful faith. Before, I told you I was hounded in the press in 95, and I've kept quiet ever since because my agents at the time told me, if you ever want to work again in Germany, you better keep quiet about Islam because it's such a negative image. So I never said anything anymore for all these years until my Hajj. Until it came out in the press. And was so suddenly so positively received. And then even, my book, I got the contract for a book. And since the book, I've been invited all around. I mean, also since the book came out in English, it came out in England only last year in September. And since this book came out, I've had so many incredible invitations all around Germany, all around the United Kingdom, even to Canada, to speak in front of 16,000 Muslims, and well, people say, because some weren't Muslims. And, and the reception has always been really positive. And I even, I did a big interview on Al Jazeera, and that was watched by the entire Arab world, and also including by the royal family of Sharjah. And they invited me on a visit to meet and to speak at one of their conferences. And, all sorts of incredible doors have opened, alhamdulillah. And it's been, I was part of the Inspired by Muhammad campaign. Then suddenly I was nominated an ambassador of the Exploring Islam Foundation. And they made me one of the faces of the Inspired by Muhammad campaign, which was a media campaign in 2010. All over London for a few weeks, there were posters on tubes, on bus shelters and in taxis, promoting slogans of our noble prophet, peace be upon him. My slogan was, I believe in protecting the environment. So did Muhammad, and there were other slogans about coexistence, about women's rights. And, that caused a big media stir. I was on BBC Question Time, on all different other channels, did interviews, again, showing the beautiful values of Islam, because Islam really needs some true PR. People don't know anything about it. They don't know that Mary is in the Quran. They don't know that Jesus is the prophet of Islam. They don't know, all the commonalities we have. So again, that's why I wrote the book. That's why I'm an ambassador for the Exploring Islam Foundation. And again, nowadays I'm also a patron of the Tell Mama campaign by the interfaith organization Faith Matters. It's a campaign against Islamophobia, where they're trying to log all the Islamophobic offenses and attacks that happen against people of Muslim faith. And they're trying to lobby and trying to change the law, in fact, that this is not allowed anymore, something very positive. So, I'm more active now in trying to make a contribution in terms of, dialogue between Islam and the West and promoting the positive values. And recently I've produced a television show, MTV to Mecca, which is a cultural show featuring contemporary Muslim culture and lifestyle that I'm trying to place on TV, again, to inspire non-Muslims, to show them the beauty in all its different facets of Islam, art, fashion, design, inspirational people, lifestyle, how we break fast, the cuisine, or how we celebrate the Prophet, peace be upon him, etc. So I'm trying to find a channel who would like to air this, as an inspiration to Muslims and non-Muslims alike, inshallah. Well, the future, as you know, is only Allah knows the future. But I'm hoping to place this show on TV so we can make a difference. We can, I'd love to get back into television, which is really what I do best. And I'd like to use my skills that I've gained in the entertainment industry for the service of Allah, And I would love to find an opening there. And of course, also get my book published again in different languages. There's an Indonesian edition coming out, Malaysian, and we're working on the Arabic. Would be nice to have a Turkish edition and maybe Farsi as well, to inspire people. And, that's it really, to use my skills in the service of God in whatever way I can. That's what I dream.